the P10C has been out for quite a while now, and now that it's been out and proven itself, we've had a lot more manufacturers jump on board with developing parts. Sights, slide releases, magazine releases, and triggers are all coming out from various companies now. This is a review for the Overwatch TAC Trigger for the P10C. Let's get to work. Work here, welcome back to the channel. As I said, the P10C has been getting a lot of love lately, and that includes from companies like Overwatch. Overwatch is a company notorious for triggers for all sorts of firearms, and now they've forayed into the CZ world with their TAC Trigger for the P10C. The TAC Trigger is a beautifully sculpted aluminum trigger with an aluminum safety shoe. It goes for $99 and comes with both the trigger shoe and a new striker that is MP3 coated. In the world of triggers, the two things that you're looking at are trigger pull and trigger weight. Overwatch handles both of these with those two parts, the trigger shoe and the striker. Now, why do they include a striker rather than a spring like the HP Industries trigger? Well, including the striker instead of the spring maintains the spring pressure of the stock P10, making it just as reliable. The addition of the MP3 coating and minor geometric changes is what affects this trigger, not so much the spring. The trigger shoe itself is absolutely fantastic looking. With minor lightning cuts on the sides, a very aggressive flat face shape, and a vertical 90-degree wall, the trigger shoe is extremely comfortable. The combination of the trigger shoe and that striker give our P10 approximately a 4-pound trigger pull. Slightly light, but the trigger pull profile makes it feel a little bit heavier than that. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the trigger itself. The stock P10 trigger, at least in mine was a late first-gen model, and yes, I do refer to them as generations. When you make a change big enough to make the magazines non-compatible, that's a gen change in my book. But with mine, the trigger was a relatively clean pull back to a wall, very short wall, very crisp break. The reset was right at the beginning of that wall, and you had a minor take up to be able to hit that wall again. The Overwatch has about a 1/4 inch of overall travel, and then you hit the wall, but the wall on the Overwatch trigger it's not a rolling break, but it's nowhere near as solid or short of a wall as the stock trigger is. You can roll that back through the wall a little more than 1/16 of an inch, and then it breaks at the back of that. So what this does for me personally, on guns where I'm used to the break being closer to the front of that wall rather than so far behind it, it almost makes the trigger pull unpredictable, which if you're one of the people that likes to be surprised by a trigger break, more power to you. I don't like that surprise. I recently took a self-defense test, and the one shot that I threw was a 15-yard headshot when I just thought the trigger was gonna break at a different time. To be honest, the trigger pull in this gun now is almost akin to a Glock trigger. That's kind of what it feels like. It's nowhere near as bad as a stock Glock trigger. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't have the plastic feel that a stock Glock trigger does. But the way that you hit the wall and then you can continue to pull and you can feel the creep past the wall. There are some instances where you get a rolling trigger or a creepy trigger and you can't feel that creep just because of the internal mechanism. It's either polished and smooth or some other reason. But this one, you can feel that creep. For some reason, you can feel that creep through that trigger pull. What that does is it makes me start to second guess where that trigger is going to break. Now, again, this is just my personal preference. I prefer a hard wall, crisp break trigger. I'm not the rolling trigger fan. I actually dislike my Legion trigger specifically because of that. So if you like a rolling break trigger, I think this is probably your best bet for a CZ P10. And if you're moving from a platform like a Glock over to a P10, also probably a pretty good choice. But if you bought the P10 because of the aspects of the original trigger, or you've tried a trigger like an HP Industries trigger, I don't think you're probably going to like the Overwatch trigger. Reliability-wise, this trigger in its setup has been great. I'm not going to tell you that it's been 100%, because no gun I have has been 100%, but the issues that I have had with it have been ammo related or just myself. not the gun. We'll just say that with a round in the chamber, I have never had this trigger not fire. Anything else that has happened with it has been other issues. So it is reliable. It's extremely comfortable. If you guys remember when I talked about the Suarez trigger, after about 200 rounds with that trigger, the safety tab and how it protruded from the main body of the shoe became really uncomfortable. You could feel where it was rubbing. The Overwatch trigger, you do not have that problem with. The safety tab in the Overwatch trigger folds perfectly flat with the front face of your trigger. And this is quite possibly one of the most comfortable triggers that I have ever used. I just personally don't prefer the trigger pull profile. Does that make me a trigger snob? Probably. Can I afford to be a trigger snob? Yeah, that's it, guys. That is the review for the Overwatch TAC Trigger for the CZ P10C. You'll find a link in that to the description down below. If I can't link directly to the page, you'll find a link to workthetrigger.com below, which will then have a link to the Overwatch page. If you guys like that rolling break, or if you're coming from a platform like Glock, you're gonna like this trigger a lot. If you're more used to like hammer-fired guns, like you've owned previous CZs that are hammer-fired and you like that, or you like the P10 trigger, maybe not your cup of tea. But I hope you liked this review. I hope you found it useful. If you did, think about hitting that subscribe button down below. If you've got the TAC Trigger from Overwatch and you've got your own thoughts on it, go ahead and write that down below too. If you've got another trigger for CZ other than HB Industries or Suarez or the TAC Trigger, go ahead and write that down too. Let me know if you want to see me run it. Head on over to our webpage, that's workthetrigger.com, if you're interested in our affiliate links, discount codes, or our merch. Remember guys, I appreciate every one of you, and until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.